It's a pleasure to have you here, where we are going to be discussing one of the most important topic across the world, not just Africa, that's food security. Food is hope, food is need. When you connect both the things, and especially when you see that close to 170 million people across the globe are food insecure, it shakes you up. You will be surprised to know that post-COVID, we are having close to 100% increase in people who are food insecure. When you come back home in continent of Africa, we see because of various reasons, including poverty, conflict, food security becomes a bigger challenge. Today, we are having two eminent guests already joined in, and we are looking forward a couple of them to join. Jérémie is with World Food Program, and Maria, she's a innovator, an entrepreneur, and a practitioner in agriculture who is having enormous experience in working around the biggest challenge the world faces today. That's a food security. Let me give a couple of points as an introduction to the topic. When we say food insecurity is just not about hunger. It extends about right nutrition as well. We are having 30 to 35% post-harvest losses across Africa. Now, even if we are able to save that amount of food, we would be able to serve far more people than we are serving today. Second challenge is that low productivity, which is currently faced by Africa. And that leads to a lot of imports from other regions of the world to just feed people of Africa. Africa is one of the most diverse agroclimatical zones in the world, capable of cultivating every possible commodity which exists today in the world. But still, unfortunately, a substantial amount of food is being imported. Third critical reason is that we see conflicts. Africa is having a lot of conflicts in different parts. And conflict also means food insecurity. Now, I would like to open the floor with initial round of introduction. We would go with Maria first. Maria, you have time to talk about you, your experiences, what you are currently doing, and then we'll take it on and go to Jérémie to understand the awesome work he and the World Food Program is doing. Floor is yours, Maria.
Thank you, Deepak. And it's a pleasure for me to be here with all of you today. I am currently in California, so I am very blessed that you invited me. For the last, I would say I have devoted the last 25 years of my life to farming. I was born in a farming family in a very important production region of northern Mexico, which was actually one of the earliest research centers for the Green Revolution for wheat and maize. So a lot of the research centers are right by my house. My grandfather was an indigenous farmer from age 8, and he died at 100. So I grew up watching him struggle as a farmer from a very small landowner to a large-scale farmer, and see the challenges that food production we faced in Mexico. I then had the opportunity to move to Europe for studies in England and across the world. And I have had several exposure to global companies, both in India, China, Brazil. I was very lucky. But most recently, since 2009, I launched several biological agriculture companies in the US. And they were actually some of the first. So the whole idea was, how do we find solutions to feed the world? And that has been one of the driving forces for my life. So most recently, like you mentioned, we launched a technology that is organic, biological, to try and increase food shelf life. Because what we're seeing is that most of the food waste actually happens from the time of harvest to the time that it gets to the actual storage. So this is a huge problem in Africa. For the last, before the pandemic, I have been researching this across the world. And what we see is that the same issues arise in developed countries and in less developed countries, and we need to find solutions. So that's what I have dedicated my time working with scientists across the world. Also, lastly, more recently, but something I'm very proud of, is we launched a nonprofit organization to support those frontline heroes that are fighting COVID, but also protect our indigenous communities that are the ones that are dying fastest of this disease and also to lack of food. So when visiting those communities, we were able to see that we're actually losing the people that have all the knowledge as to how to produce our food and how to keep all those ancient practices that kept us sustainable. So that's a little bit about me.
Maria, you have been doing a fabulous job of putting all your insights, knowledge, and understanding in serving the planet. So that's great. Now we'll go to actually Jérémie to understand a little bit about his initiative, and especially we know that in the backdrop of the World Peace Award from Nobel Institute, that's very, very critical in bringing food security and hunger to the center of the discussion. Especially serving those in the conflict area has been the hallmark of what World Food Program has been doing for decades. I would like to understand from you, Jérémie, that actually what are the areas you're working and a little bit of background about you and your current initiatives.
Great. Thanks a lot, Deepak, for this introduction, and for you as well, Maria. Pleasure to be here today to discuss this topic. So let me just start with a very short introduction about myself. So I actually worked in the startup scene, mostly in Berlin, for 6 to 7 years, and then I decided to take a leap of faith and try to apply the skill set that I had developed for a bigger and a larger purpose. And I joined the World Food Program. So WFP is the largest humanitarian agencies with a double agenda. On one side, saving life. On the other side, changing life. So it delivers food assistance in emergencies and works with communities to improve nutrition and build resilience. In 2019, WFP provided assistance to roughly 97 million people in 88 countries. I'm personally in charge of the Innovation Hub for Eastern Africa that we recently launched. So why East Africa? So East Africa is home to only 4% of the world population, but account for roughly 20% of the total global number of acutely food insecure people. So within this region, we actually have like a microcosm of a lot of development and humanitarian challenges that other parts of the world are actually facing. So with this innovation hub for Eastern Africa, we have 4 main objectives. The first one is to support WFP in harnessing innovation. So to help local entrepreneurs develop their ID and scale them. The second one is to upscale local innovation ecosystem. The third one is to create a partnership with the private sector. So we believe in the power of the private sector and market forces to medium to long term solve a lot of food security related challenges. And we have partnership with organizations like BCG, Google, Singularity Universities, and so on. And the first one is to help those local innovation to access to funding. So if I go back to the first to one on our innovation program, so what we do also, we're working together with the Wfp Innovation Accelerator, so which is our HQ, so to say, which is based in Munich. So we run acceleration program for other agencies like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNFPA, and so on. And we have a strong focus on WFP. Within WFP, we are looking for A, external solution, and B, WFP-driven solution. And we accelerate them through the different programs that we have. So usually what we do is we issue a call for application on specific challenges that have been identified in the field. And food security, for example, is broken down into a lot of different verticals. We select a solution, we take them to a bootcamp, a pitch event, and then they can enter our sprint program where they get up to 100,000 USD in funding, access to a network of global experts, and they can then enter our scale-up enablement program, where the goal is to scale them from one country to a multiple set of countries. Now, if we take a step back and look at what is a comparative advantage of WFP to actually run innovation program. So we believe that innovation is critical to tackle most of the challenges that food insecure countries are actually facing. And B, WFP has very deep field access, has a strong network of cooperating partners in the field, have access and strong relationship with government, have a lot of knowledge when it comes to food system. So we believe that this is a key value proposition to be able to support startups to actually reach a higher level and scale. Yeah, so that's it on my side on a high level. Over to you, Deepak.
Yeah, perfect. A very, very articulated description of the great work WFP is doing. So World Food Program, I also strongly believe that for those who don't have access, it becomes very critical because it's about being alive, right? Because the basic requirement of any human being is food. And it's great work which is being done. I appreciate it and thank you for that. Going back to Maria, you're having experience across the developed world, developing world, right? You have been with the farmers, you yourself having being from the farm itself, like working out of Mexico, right? I would like to understand, where do you see that actually, like, when we talk about all the technologies, whether it's biotechnologies or digital technologies, what do you think that actually are these technology just on the typically I'm saying that PowerPoint presentations, or the implementation of the same is gonna actually make us more food secure? So what are your views and experiences on that?
It's a very good question. My passion for agriculture actually started or continued in India. So I visited about 50 different farms 4 years ago. And I got to see a lot of need in India. Unfortunately, as you have experienced and I have seen your journeys, our beloved countries are suffering. And this is something that we see across the world. So when I look at technology, I started a startup in the biotech industry promoting biological agriculture, which at the time, 10 years ago, here in the US, people didn't see it as something that was required, right? So when we launched it here, you could almost tell that people thought you were crazy. And now it's a segment that is booming. So when we look at technology, you have the new kind of soil regenerative technologies that are coming in place that are key for countries like India, like Africa, so that you can, countries within Africa, so that you can continue to promote agriculture. Right now, a study showed actually that we only have 60 years of farming left. So this is Scientific American. If we continue having the practices that we are currently doing across the world. So very intensive farming, especially here in the US, but also in other areas of the world. So I would say the biotechnology side is one area where we can, that is very helpful for farmers, especially in less developed countries. Like in India, we brought the organic technology to farmers that had struggled in not understanding how to use the different fertilizers, pesticides, etc. So as you know, in India, many practices before they were closer to nature. So we were giving that back to them and it actually gave very good results. So that was a very interesting part that I think of technology that should remain. When you look at digital agriculture, I think I always take it with a pinch of salt for less developed countries, because we can say that digital agriculture will revolutionize ag in many spaces. But when you have a small, and I think it's 65% of farms in many African countries are generally smallholder farms. So rural farmers, very small, mainly run by women. So how do you get those farmers to use the technologies? You have been doing a lot of work on that. But what I see as technologies of the future to support the current food crisis that we're facing is looking at technologies that help extend shelf life, because that is one of the biggest crises that we're facing. Water optimization, different types of solar power energy. And when I just came back from Mexico from visiting 10 indigenous states, so mainly in the Mayan communities. And one of the biggest challenges that they have is that they can't stop going to work, right? The pandemic has decreased the amount of mobility that we have globally, but these people still have to go to work. They still have to go and produce what they're going to eat, because that's what they depend on. So this is a crisis that we're facing globally. And I think that as an industry of innovators, we need to find solutions to tackle and to help them. One area that I think it's not directly related to technology, but actual financing, or you could say fintech for small landowners and small farms across the world, are areas that I would think need to be a focus from what I've seen in the last 6 to 7 months.
Fair enough. That's a great way of putting, I'm saying that, a complex subject, right, in very, very simple manner. Jérémie, we would like to understand from you, you have been interacting with a lot of innovations happening actually on the grassroots level in Africa. What in your view are critical here, because there have been a lot of talk about digital agriculture. There have been a lot of talk about typically agro, I'll say that nomists who are trying to work with the new hybrid type of varieties. There is a talk of GMOs. So biotech, digital agriculture, remote sensing, as well as we see that Africa is having a basic problem of infrastructure, right? Reaching out with the roads, right? Having the storages, those basics are missing. So how do you see that when we talk about all this advanced innovation, right? While we see at the same time that the basics are missing. So where do you see that, is the sweet spot? What is the immediate requirement which Africa needs to do as of today, rather than tomorrow?
Great question, Deepak. And I think there is no silver bullet, right? So there is no single innovation that can enable us to crack the food insecurity challenge here in Africa. So the solution is going to come from a lot of different innovation, which are going to happen along the different value chain. So Maria, you were talking about PHL, you were talking post-harvest losses, you were talking about access to finance, input, fertilizer, and so on. So I think we need to have a lot of innovation happening alongside this value chain. There is a question on whether there could be a leap forward. So basically, Africa skipping certain phase of development and moving directly to technical solution. My personal input on this is that most of the innovation are not necessarily on the tech component, but they are mostly on the business model. They are mostly on the operational model. And if we take one example, we've been working with in the past with a Hello tractor. So to make it very simple, it's a Uber for tractor. So the idea is that as a lot of farmers have a very small acreage for their farm, so 1 to 2 acre on average, it's not profitable for tractor owner to serve those people because the market is just too fragmented. So the idea is to aggregate those smaller farmers so that it makes sense for tractor to go and do land preparation and land harvesting. So we can say, okay, the innovation is around this technology platform that they are bringing, the optimization that they are doing, so that the tractor is going to take the fastest way to go and serve those smaller farmers and so on. At the end of the day, when you look at this, you have a lot of challenges because those farmers, they might not have a digital smartphone. Even USSD application, it's not that easy to use and so on. So here the question was, okay, how do we make it work from an operational model? How can we work, for example, with farmer service centers or extension worker so that they can do the aggregation for us because those people, they have access to technology. So basically the point I'm trying to make is that those technology, they will enable Africa to increase its yield to a big extent. But it's not so much a technology, but more how do we apply it in such a context where internet penetration is still relatively low, where a lot of people are still using a basic phone.
Fair enough. So, Maria, same question to you. You have worked in developing world. Now, the basic penetration of a smartphone, right, is a challenge, right? Connectivity is a challenge. While we are coming with all the concept of from blockchain to machine learning to drones flying, right? Now with the basic, because mobile is a very critical part of any tech stack today. How do you see this limitation of not having access to smartphone or not having access to internet? Have you come across those technologies which can work without them in your experience somewhere?
Yes, a lot of work is being done currently in Brazil. Actually, if we look at innovation hubs for agriculture, Brazil is booming because of the same reason. They produce a lot and they have very large agricultural regions, but also areas where they have very limited, very limited satellite, very limited internet access. So I would say in Latin America, they're developing lots of new technologies to ensure that farmers have access to internet and smartphones and can remain mobile in Mexico as well. But I think that more work needs to be done so that we can copy paste those same type of technologies in areas within African countries that need this basic kind of like in India. In India, everybody has a smartphone and good internet access. So how do we replicate that same infrastructure in certain areas to support and drive development and make sure that we keep those farmers communicated as well? So those are tools that will enable them to produce more.
Yeah, even as you rightly mentioned, in India, we are working on a lot of low bandwidth technologies and even the feature phone, typically trying to make SMS gateway as a blockchain node, right? Those type of small innovation where when you just send typically a private key, right, to an SMS, and the SMS gateway starts acting as actually blockchain network gate, typically node, and that's ensure traceability. Even if you don't have a smartphone, farmer become a part of the traceability ecosystem. So that is one example which comes straight away to my mind. Second is that SMS bot based application. So typically, you don't need machine learning or you don't need artificial intelligence sitting on the smartphone of the farmer.
Yeah.
He can just SMS because we have his data about his mobile phone. We know which farmer is there. We know what he's cultivating. So all those data is already there. So when he said that what I'm supposed to do, right? So we know that actually he's asking this question for very simple reason is there is a locust attack and he's asking for what should be the solution. So in a vernacular language, a SMS goes back to him saying what are the actually steps he need to take or what are the preventive steps he need to ensure that to save his crop, or the pricing of connecting him with the lowest closest marketplace and sharing that price in a very very simple manner, because you don't give him a price of 500 commodities. You already know he's growing rice. You already know that actually he's based out of, for example, Ahmedabad. So you know that there are 3 marketplaces close to him. And then you just in the morning give him the price of these 3 markets. So he can take a very simple decision, which market I should go and sell my produce to. And yeah, please, you were saying something. Yeah, please.
So one thing I wanted to say is that most farmers that I have come across all across the world have very similar traits. They like it simple. Right. So the farming is something that has been brought through them, not by school, but by their family, the way their grandfather used to do it. So they want something easy, something simple and all in one. And I even see that in very, very developed farmers here in California. Some of the largest farmers, they have the same traits as the smallest farmers I've seen in India. So technology has to be something that farmers can use and very user friendly, adapted to them because they're very smart people. They have a lot of knowledge. So how do you package all of that into a solution that is easy to use, but also gives them everything that they need access to, like what you were mentioning. They want to go see weather, pricing, everything that they can in once because they're busy. They're always active from very early to very late.
Yeah, and another area which I would be adding where it's typically very very high tech, but customized to the area where the internet access is a challenge. You'll see that most of the drone technologies they are actually created with the sense that actually all the data would be processed on the cloud. So the information is actually continuously is being uploaded to cloud where the processing happens, which tells you which part of the farm would be having a typical type of challenge or because of the pest or maybe some disease or some deficiency. we work with a company based out of China, which was actually good in hardware, and then we tried to use AI on the edge, where actually there was information fed in the chip, which was actually part of the drone itself. So it would just pinpoint actually, like, which are the areas, right, which are having these challenges, and which can very simply with a handheld device you can find out, actually, these are the hotspot areas where you need to do the, like, typically that spraying of pesticide. Nothing goes to cloud, nothing comes back from the cloud, right? It processes, the drone processes it, it is intelligent. It's just not a device which send data to the cloud. So a drone which is not actually IoT, and we tried it, but the costs were a little bit prohibitive, so still it's a work in progress. Jérémie, we would like to understand from you, like, you have been on the ground a lot. You've explained some of the, like, there is no silver bullet. But at the same time, are you hopeful about some broad technologies, whether it is in a bioscience or whether it is actually, like, in digital space, where you strongly see that the scalability and typically one size fit all sort of philosophy can be deployed? Maybe it's a satellite or drone or any specific technology which you believe, like, which would be very much relevant to Africa, in your view?
I do believe a lot that the technology is going to be able to accelerate the agricultural development here in Africa. And I think just tying up to what Maria was saying earlier, so with the need for farmers to have solutions which are simple. At the end of the day, every startup needs to show a certain value proposition, right? But when we look at a lot of digital convenient products that are being developed in Europe, for example, you're going to have a lot of early adopters who might just be interested in checking out this solution. I think here for smallholder farmers, you really need to start very small to be able to showcase what it brings to them, and then afterwards it can scale very quickly. But it's very important in this phase to be able to showcase, okay, what does it bring to them. Now, when we look at technology, I think there is a lot of technology that can bring strong yield improvements. So we are talking about drone or satellite imagery, for example, which is able to understand what is the soil composition, what is the level of moisture. We're looking at all the IoT device for soil sensing, for example, very similar to have irrigation model which are smarter, which enable to just generate the right level of water. So I think there is going to be soon like a very strong wave of technology which are going to be introduced in the agriculture here in Africa. As you were touching upon, I think one challenge right now is just the monetization scheme. So how do we make those solutions actually more affordable for the one who are at the bottom of the pyramid? So like this 60 to 80% smallholder farmers which we have in Africa. So I think here still some work needs to be done. On the short term, I do see a lot of low-hanging fruit with just digitalization of the value chain. In Africa, it's not, or like in Africa, in certain parts of Africa, like the process is not transparent enough. When it's not transparent, it means that certain intermediaries are actually going to capture a big part of the added value. So here, just by having transparency, which is brought by digital traceability, for example, access to market where they can see like the different prices and so on, what you were saying, and basic application where they can compare the prices for different inputs that they need and so on. This can create value right now for all those different smallholder farmers.
Fair enough. So, Jérémie, continuing to what we have just discussed, like, what policy changes do you see so that these innovations, these startups or I'm saying that investment from abroad in these technologies are possible? Because see, 54 odd countries in Africa, all are having different level of, I'm saying that, ease of doing business, right? Especially like, when some startup who just want to build a business in Africa, there are a lot of challenges, and the investment needs to come, right? And investment will be coming from all across the world, and to invest in African companies is another challenge. So like, when you see the startup ecosystem, what do you think like, needs to be done on a policy environment level so that like, the startup agri-tech or like, a food tech environment can be more, I'll say that, vibrant for the entrepreneurs and innovators?
Yeah, that's a really good question, but a tough one. So obviously, all needs can only happen if there is a conducive business environment and if there is a right political commitment and public investment. I wouldn't necessarily look at it from a regulation standpoint, even though this needs to happen. For example, when we look at food security, on one hand, we have how much food is actually produced. On the other hand, we have the quality of the food. Yes, and if we look, for example, at aflatoxin, just grains having too high of a moisture level, we know that this has like a massive impact in Africa on the health of people. So here, tighter regulation, for example, from the government, would make business models that try or innovations that try to tackle the aflatoxin level, so the post-harvest losses, a lot more viable, right? Because the premium between selling the grain on informal market and actually selling it on a regulated market will be big enough to make those business model viable. I think what's really needed from government is, for example, investment in infrastructure. It's very difficult for people in rural areas to get their food either through export or just to cities. One big change which is happening is just a rapid urbanization, which is completely changing the dynamics between the rural and the urban world. So only with stronger infrastructure, which would be developed by the different government, we will be able to tackle post-harvest losses. We will be able to allow all those different smaller farmers to access larger market and to potentially export opportunities.
Perfect. Very well articulated. I would also like to add a couple of like my viewpoints on that. I believe Africa needs a solid boost of investment, not just in actually taking out the raw material from Africa, but in where actually the ecosystems can be developed. Unfortunately, we have seen that whenever in Africa a country opens up, it's about how to ensure that the mining and those type of industries, right, where the investment comes in, or maybe infrastructure where somebody wants to build the airports and the bridges and the roads. I believe that is critical for sure. But I see that lack of various governments focus on creating right sort of ecosystem where people are giving back to the society, the local economy, right? It should not always be can I extract thing and take it out? Even I believe within Africa itself, the countries are not doing trade with each other. They're happy to do trade with the US, they're happy to do trade with Europe, they're happy to do trade with India and China. But when it comes to doing trade with the next door neighbor, right, there suddenly those challenges emerges. And even if you see that in intercontinental trade in commodities is pretty low, and then a commodity which is being actually cultivated in Ghana is not imported or is not bought all the way to Kenya, and same the other way around. While Kenya is very I'm saying comfortable in importing from maybe India or Europe. So I believe inter continent trade that needs to open up, and I'm very happy that African Union is doing a lot of things to take care of that specific issue. This brings me to Maria. Maria, I would, as a startup entrepreneur, right? And you are not someone who is just out of the college and is just let's go trying to create a startup for being a glamorous person, right? You are someone who has been through the pain of being in corporate life, and here you start thinking that can I deliver something back to the society, and that is the reason for you to create these two enterprises. What you see the government should be doing in case they want you to be in Africa?
That's a good question. And I used to think a lot like that before, that government needs to create change. And I think more recently, after COVID hit, I realized that society needs to drive change. Youth needs to drive change. So I have had the honor of presenting to many groups of students in Africa and Zimbabwe, for example, for Jobs of Tomorrow. Kids that want to join STEM and agriculture, and I have seen the passion. So even though government has a huge role to play, I feel that it is also for private sector and how we organize communities into serving. And what you mentioned, Deepak, is great. Those industries that are investing, right, that are taking resources out of those countries, they should also give back by creating hubs of technology to create the new innovators of the future. And we have to start them very young. So the groups of kids that I was talking to were 15 to 18 years old. And the passion they had about farming, they want to know, many of the questions they were asking me is, how do I get an opportunity to go to Silicon Valley, right? How do I get a scholarship to go there? And I'm like, that's fine, but you can create your own Silicon Valley in your country, in Zimbabwe, for farming, right? You have that opportunity. My grandfather was a farmer in Mexico from an indigenous community, and I never realized that the technology that I would have developed from his upbringing would come to the US and make it to the world. But it's part of that belief that is going to help us drive that change. So government has a big stake to play, but I think that more so us as a society need to empower those youth. And like you have been doing, Jérémie, those innovators to promote technology to help drive change. I think that's what's going to be the most important thing.
Maria, I would like to also ask you, yeah, Jérémie, you were saying something, please.
Yeah, no, I think Maria was actually making a very strong point. And just to build on this, I think we also have a key role to play. So when we look at the state of the startup or the innovation ecosystem here in East Africa, what we see is that a large share of the investment is actually coming from overseas, and a large share of this investment is actually going towards startups which are funded by people with an international background, right? So that's not how we can support the next generation of local entrepreneurs and give the tools to those local students or those people that are starting their career and so on to change the statu quo. So I think we have a key responsibility as well in empowering national people to with the right tool to drive innovation and improve the statu quo.
Yeah, very pertinent point, Jérémie. Jérémie, here actually, just continuing to what your thoughts were. When we say startup ecosystem and innovators, one of the very important need is actually the capital, right? And I've been interacting with a lot of the policy makers across Africa, also in African Union, and the biggest question comes in that actually how to get the capital in Africa to support these startups and innovators. And especially after COVID, the limitation is there for the government also to spend, right? Because the taxes has gone down. There are challenges to kickstart the economy. More money is going towards the healthcare. So based on all those challenges, do you see going forward, getting capital to Africa for innovation startup would be a challenge, or do you have some views of how that can be taken care of?
A really good question. So I actually think that the potential is massive because in a lot of countries in Europe, in the US, or even in Asia, there is a certain maturity, right? So when we look at corporations, for example, Africa is super interesting because with a super high level of penetration in their core market, Africa is the next stage, so to say, to keep growing. When we look at investors as well, we see that like a lot of VCs, money is actually available and could be directed towards, let's say, African market. What's a bit missing here is de-risking those investments. So when you have VC funds, for example, which are driven from Europe, it's difficult to invest in local market because the ease of doing business might not be that great. So they need to have local offices. They need to be working with local partners that are going to be the one identifying what are the risks, or like do the first screening and showcase like the strongest startup. So I don't necessarily think that the challenge per se is a lack of available capital for new solution, but that it's more taking measure to de-risk those capital investments, taking measure to make this more transparent. And I think just a couple more points, which I find actually very interesting, is that there is a challenge right now if you come with a big fund to actually spend your money, right? Because it's still the innovation ecosystem here are still nascent. So we have like success story like Nigeria, Kenya, and so on, South Africa. But in a lot of countries, it's actually just developing. So you can't just give a couple of million. You have to start with seed funding, with ticket size, which might be below 100K, and then slowly build up. So what's needed is to have local or international organizations supporting those entrepreneurs to help them further go through the different development stage. So I think probably in a couple of years, like the market would be a lot more prone for bigger investment from VCs, for example. And the second thing, which is often overlooked because it's less sexy, but there is a lot of SMEs which actually need a lot of funding. I think that's where local capital might come more into play. How do we give funding to somebody who is running a chicken farm on a small scale, who this is not sexy enough to attract international capital? So here there needs to be work done in a lot of different countries to just allow a lot more loan to be disbursed to those SMEs, because at the end of the day, they take care of the bulk of the food production or transformation.
No, that's a great point. Actually, in fact, one of my friends based out of US, she's also a technology pioneer. She runs a company called Obama, and she's doing the SME finance actually in Africa. So they work with actually the SMEs in Africa and create an aggregation of typically the debt, and then actually source that investment right from more developed, evolved economies to take care of that, because actually the arbitrage and the interest rates are very, very different in different geographies. So very, very pertinently explain that yes, the local capital can also play a very, very vital role. Maria, again, towards the closing session of we are at the last stage of this discussion, I would understand from you, based on your experience, right? We see food security is a challenge, right? Still in Africa, you have hunger. And I believe hunger, conflict and hunger, it's a vicious cycle, right? It just keeps on going round and round, right? How you ensure that Africa is able to be food secure? Whatever your views are, your recommendation for the government, for the private players, for startups, please share.
That's a great question. And I think everybody's trying to figure out the answer right now and has been for many years. I think that if we look at the situation that we're currently experiencing, taking care of soil is key, especially for African countries. So any technologies to do soil regeneration through the use of microorganisms, to include training for farmers so that they know what alternatives there are to them, that rather than just conventional agriculture. Some of the researchers that I have worked with here at UC Davis actually go to Africa to train different farmers in different countries as to what biological resources they can use that they have probably already in their backyard to actually produce more. So a lot about education, soil management to reduce soil degradation, water management is going to be key. And like I said earlier, I was at a conference with Canada and many governments, and if we continue doing things the way we are right now, we only have actually 10 years of farming. But no, we actually have 10 years to fix it, right? So within what we do, the steps that we do as a world to protect our planet are key. And that is going to drive food security, because technology is one thing, but how do we protect what we currently have? Our sources of water. One area that I never looked at before, but it opened my eyes big time when I was in Mexico, is how do we preserve the ancient practices that our forefathers brought us in terms of farming? Yeah, how do we preserve those, preserve seed? All those practices need to be treasured so that we know how to preserve the world going forward. Because we moved away from that, and I think that a lot of the issues that we're facing now are because of that. So Pachamama is what the Mayans call the earth, and they say the earth is giving us a message. The head of the indigenous governors of Mexico told me Pachamama is giving us a message, and we need to protect her. So how do we reinforce those practices as well as technology? I think is going to be various stages of approaching the issue. So technology, soil regeneration, water management, what technologies do we have to help farmers protect their water and utilize it in the most efficient way, in a cost-effective manner, Deepak, not very expensive sensors, utilizing the right seed, but also towards the end is, what do you do once you produce, right? How do you prevent that from not making it to market? What we know is that over, I think it's 40%, and I had a slide on it, but we don't have time for that, of what actually gets lost. And it's pretty sad. And Africa is actually one of the highest, I was looking at the full supply chain, highest losses, as well as India. 45% of fruit and vegetables. And every year, we waste as much as 222 million tons of food. So while we're wasting food globally, people are dying of hunger. So how do we create technologies that help us extend shelf life, and also infrastructure to help that harvested product reach the tables of those people that need it? So I think it's going to take youth, whoever, children right now, kids, to have dreams that they can do it. We have seen so many examples of innovators that have created life-changing technologies. So we need to give kids the tools to dream of the solutions that will actually help us tackle this, because we don't have the answers, but they will.
Great, very insightful, Maria. I think you summed up all your experience of decades right in few minutes, and I believe that that's very important. The same question to you, Jérémie. What do you believe needs to be done to ensure that Africa can be food secure, based on your experiences? What are the few things, if you are being made a god for maybe few hours, how you'll be putting your magic wand to change the way Africa is, to ensure that everybody is having food on their plate in Africa?
Thanks for this question. So I think the first thing I would do is build local capacity, because as Maria was saying, people here in Africa, they hold the key to unlock the potential that they have. Only with stronger capacity building can they really harness this. And I think, going back to what you were saying, I would tend to I had a magic wand just to make the business environment more conducive, just to give higher chances to all those different people who are trying to make a change and make a difference. And I think anyway, when I look at this, we're going in the right direction. When I look at the amount of application we get for our cohort, when I look at the we're working with Hub Prize, for example, on a global challenge for food for good. The amount of students who are signing up for those programs and so on. So the appetite is there, the technology is there. So it's going to take a couple of years, and it's going to take a higher level of internet penetration, and it's going to take a few failures before we really find the keys on all those different parts of the value chain, right? But what I do see right now gives me a really a lot of hope for the way forward in our world of tomorrow.
Very well said. So let me also have this magic one for maybe a couple of minutes to share my views, in what I believe Africa should be doing, so that to make it food secure. So I would be taking all the inputs which we had into discussion. The first thing which comes to mind is that Africa being a young continent, there is a lot of possibility of innovation and creating local capabilities. So the government, the private sector, multilateral agencies, everybody should be trying to put their hands together and create a viable multi-stakeholder approach to create local capabilities. So I believe that is the first thing which we need to do. Second, as Maria was pointing out, the wastage. It is atrocious that actually we are having hungry people and then we end up wasting a lot of food, both pre-harvest as well as post-harvest. And Africa is having a dubious distinction of being among, I'm saying, that those continents which is wasting a lot of food, and we have to reduce it. There are bio as well as digital technologies, from traceability to I'll say that those type of agrochemicals which can be used to increase the shelf life, or agri-biotech which can increase shelf life of the produce, which should be taken care of, and then also build up infrastructure of storage. Whether it is about the perishable and non-perishable, we need to create that infrastructure of the storage. Third, I would love to see that actually African countries, they do more trade among themselves, identify what are the demand and supply gaps, and within the continent, those things are taken care of. Fourth thing, Africa is having this opportunity of, because it has not been touched too much with what we have had in the past, from green revolution to digital revolution, which we have today in agriculture. It is having a clean slate. It can be more environmentally sustainable in their agriculture. Still, you are having beautiful forests which has not been chopped off to grow palm or rubber or tobacco. They should be preserved, and we have to see to it that actually we do agriculture in an environment friendly manner. And finally, I believe we have to leverage the youth and the motivation, fire in the belly, which African continent is having, to ensure we make Africa more food secure. I would request for last comment from my panelist. Jérémie, you go first, if you just want to put some closing comment, and then Maria.
Yeah, so thanks a lot for this session. Was a pleasure to take part in this. I just want to wrap up this session with recognizing that there is a huge amount of effort to be done going forward. When we look at East Africa, the number of hungry people increased in 2020 from 24 million to 41 million. So we are facing severe challenges due to COVID, due to locusts, due to man-made catastrophe. But I think, again, there is a lot of people out there hungry to make a difference. There is a lot of innovation which are going to make a difference in the next couple of years. So just want to wrap this up with this message of hope. And what I'm seeing here makes me go to bed in a good mood. Over to you, Maria.
Great. Thank you both for joining and for inviting me, Deepak, and for this wonderful insight, Jérémie, into finding out what you're doing. So it inspires me a lot to continue with what I'm working on. The message I would like to leave is a message of any action that you take, as small as it may be, will make a huge difference. So if we drive that message to those innovators that you're working with in your different cohorts, they don't need to think that they need a startup the size of Silicon Valley to be successful. Something in farming and something in technology can create huge waves of change, as long as they have that belief that they are empowered, that they can make a difference. So all those voices that I meet, the kids that I meet, we're working with Haiti right now, kids that are in very dangerous zones, and we're going to create a program called Farms for Kids. So how do we empower those kids? And I keep bringing that, but that's very important to me from what I've seen, and make them self-sustainable. So give them the tools to produce their own food. I think that's going to be key going forward. And the message of hope that they can do it.
Awesome. So Jérémie and Maria, thanks a lot for participating in this session. We had, unfortunately, some technical issues, so that's why a couple of panelists were not able to join. So still things were being figured out. That happens, but we had a very, very good discussion, and I take back with me a lot of knowledge and insight. I'm pretty sure that audience would have also got a lot of insights from what both of you shared. Thank you, and God bless you. Let's work together to make Africa a continent to look forward to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great week.
Take care, everybody.